gentlemen, welcome to the Source Material Comics Podcast. This is episode 246. You know, we're talking Constantine, Hellblazer specifically, Hellblazer issues 41 through 46. 1 for 2 for 3 for 4 for 5 for 6. Yep, had to count them on my fingers. And we have a full panel tonight, Mark Radulich. So let me go ahead and go through the introductions here real quick. Mark Radulich, you heard his voice there. Mark, the patriarch of the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. Are you ready, sir, to be discussing one John Constantine Hellblazer tonight?
I promised I would behave myself. Do you know I'm like actually shaking right now?
You having withdrawals?
I'm trying so hard not to be me that I'm physically shaking.
Best of luck, sir.
I'm trying, man.
And coming back here to the Source Material Podcast, he is king of his own realm over at Resurrections and Adam Warlock and Thanos podcast. Last heard on Source Material, I think in May, doing some heavy lifting when we covered Avengers Forever. Al Sedano, welcome back to the Source Material Comics Podcast.
Woohoo! I'm back.
Yeah. Hey, man, we're talking Hellblazer. We're talking some Constantine. I think they're both the same person. Are you ready, sir?
Oh, yeah. I am ready. I had to nip down to the bog, and I don't know what that means, but I did it. I'm all ready to go.
All right. Now, he's been playing video games, entertaining his subs on Twitch. He last dove into the waters with us back in December of last year to assist us on Jeff John's second volume of Aquaman. He is Cole Marentet. Cole Marentet, you ready to talk some John Constantine?
I am ready. I am ready to talk some John Constantine.
All right, spectacular. And making his triumphant return, he hasn't visited us since the days of Blog Talk Radio, Mark Radulich. Blog Talk Radio. I think we did it live, too. I don't think it was recorded. His last appearance involved Alan Moore and Superman. And whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow in September of 2015. That's how long. Almost 4 years since Tim Browning has been back on the podcast. Tim Browning, welcome back, sir. You ready to talk some Constantine?
I am ready, man. This is my dude.
All right. Now, listen, there is some, I'm just going to go ahead and address this right now. There is a pronunciation bridge that may have to be crossed.
Everybody hold hands as we cross the pronunciation bridge.
Oh, no.
It can either be Constantine or Constantine.
I actually was going to correct you just for all those people out there that were already had their butts tightened up that you were saying Constantine.
I knew it was going to happen. But the good thing here on the Source Material Comics Podcast is we all hold hands, we cross the pronunciation bridge, and we all come out happy on the other side. Anybody can pronounce anything they want, any way they want, okay? Just so long as the vowels and consonants somewhat match what you're trying to say.
I intend to pronounce his name as Ham Sandwich.
You would, sir. You would.
I was going to say Jeff.
Jeff Constantine.
Jeff Christ.
There you go. All right, so Mark, why don't you go ahead and tell me why we're doing this book this week? Because you picked this. This is, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, this is Dangerous Habits. Hellblazer, Dangerous Habits takes place between Hellblazer issues 41 through 46. It was published by DC, specifically their Vertigo imprint. According to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, the on-sale date is March 19th, 1991, all the way through August 20th of 1991. Writer, Garth Ennis. Penciler, William Simpson. Inkers, Mark Pennington, Malcolm Jones III, Thomas Sutton, Mark McKenna, Kim DeMilder, and Stan Walk. Letterer, Gaspar Saladino. Colorist, Thomas J. Ziocco. Mark, you chose this one. Why don't you kind of tell me why?
This one's really easy. I decide every Halloween or every October, we try to do more of these scarier, horror-themed characters, books, and stories here on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. We dedicate all manner of podcasts to them, whether it be TV shows, movies, comic books, etc. Sometimes even bands. It had occurred to me that there was a movie and a television show. Matt Ryan's Ham Sandwich has been showing up on DC's Legends of Tomorrow. And I thought, well, I've never seen his show that only lasted one season on NBC. So figure we would do a TV party on the show and on trial on the movie. So that meant we had to do a comic book too. In my research, I found that this one was highly regarded.
Okay. All right. Did you have any idea what you're going to be getting into at all?
No.
Okay. All right.
Oh, wow.
I literally went on Amazon, typed in Constantine, Velveteen, however you pronounce his name, and looked at the first 5-star one, saw that it was kind of an independent story that you don't, as I've said before on the Source Material podcast, I don't really want to do stuff where you have to have 89,000 pages of backstory in order to understand why Wolverine's nose was falling off. So, So I try to look for stories that's standalone stories, and this one, from everything I read, kind of stood on its own, and it does. I have no idea what happened before or after in Hellblazer. This one stands on its own.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm right there with you. Didn't know what I was going to be getting into reading this. This is the first time I've actually ever sat down and read some Hellblazer. Trust me, it's been suggested. Hellblazer's been suggested by quite a few people, including Tim Browning, who we've probably had conversations about that in the past. But I've just never had the opportunity to pick the book up and even take a look at anything. I was familiar with the character. So let's talk about who Constantine is real quick. John Constantine. Character first appeared in Saga of the Swamp Thing number 37, which, by the way, hey, if you're a Patreon subscriber, I am going to be publishing on the Patreon, I guess, my experience of reading Swamp Thing number 37. So I read the first appearance of John Constantine in that book, and I enjoyed it. I recorded my experience and all the things I learned from it. Happened. Mark, we talked about Saga of the Swamp Thing issues, I think it was 20 through 27. Anyway, it was Alan Moore's first run.
The anatomy lesson, the best comic I've ever read.
Yeah. Some good stuff. And this happens 10 issues after that. June of 1985, according to the wiki here. Created by, and there's a host of creators here for John Constantine: Alan Moore, Rick Veitch, Steve Bissetti, John Tottlebean, and Jamie Delano, and John Ridgway. So that's 6 creators, according to what we see here. Constantine is a working-class warlock, a cult detective and con man stationed in London. He is known for his endless cynicism, deadpan snarking, ruthless cunning, and constant chain smoking. But he's also a passionate humanitarian driven by a heartfelt desire to do some good in his life. So there you go. There's the wiki explanation of who John Constantine is. So we're going to go around the horn here real quick before we get into the book. I want to ask the people about what their experience was with John Constantine. Mark, you kind of already touched on it. I don't know if you had anything else to add. I mean, you're familiar with the character in Legends of Tomorrow and what was on the CW network. You've never read anything with him in it, though, before, have you?
My only other experience with John Constantine was in the Justice League Dark animated movie, where Batman goes around collecting the magic users in Swamp Thing and deals with some demon or another. It's one of the more recent DC animated films. I actually have a question for the panel or whoever the Constantine experts are on here. Has the thing with him getting sending Astra to hell has that been like a central part of his lore from the get-go, or is that a recent invention, or what?
That happened before this run. It was in the Jamie Delano run before Dangerous Habits.
Yeah, basically him sending Astra to hell is sort of his origin story. It's why he is the way he is.
It's kind of Batman's parents dying in a way to him.
Oh, good, but not nearly as many times shown on screen.
All right. Well, Al Sedano, let's hear your experience with John Constantine and why you wanted to be here.
Like Mark, this was my first introduction to him, this trade, although not for this time. I bought this the trade I bought back in like 94, 95. And I did read his series for a good several years in like the late 90s. So somewhere around in the 80s or 90s to like 130s, like 150s or 60s even. So when Warren Ellis was writing it, and Garth Ennis and a few other people were doing it. So I go back with him a little bit.
Okay.
And of course, I did read all those Swamp Thing ones where he first showed up. This is one of my favorite stories, comic-wise. And it's all self-contained. You don't need to know anything else. Like Mark said, you can read this and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Cole Maritet, tell me about Constantine and why you wanted to be here.
Well, I first was introduced to Constantine in a completely different Vertigo book, Sandman. He shows up in the first arc of Sandman very briefly, and he and Dream have a short adventure, and it intrigued me about the character, so I picked up Original Sins, which was the first graphic novel of the original Hellblazer series. And I've just been picking up comics here and there as I could. I read through Dangerous Habits, I read through some of the later stuff. he is my only non-superheroic character that I follow in comics. I love his attitude. I love his outlook on life. John Constantine impresses me, and all the writers on his books have impressed me thoroughly.
Tim Browning, you were under a rock, and I said the words Hellblazer.
Much like Cole just said, my first experience with the character was actually in a different book, because I hadn't read at that point in my life, because I was small and lived, in a little podunk town. My first introduction to the character was in Crisis on Infinite Earths. And we were talking a little bit before this started. The character, he was my first experience with a non-superhero that just left an impression on me, and he was just so different than anything, in my childhood I'd encountered before. I mean, I think Dangerous Habits was 87 or 88, so I was literally, 7 years old. This character opened up my eyes that comic books could be something completely different. Obviously, I found out about Alan Moore, and, that completely changed my outlook on comics, my outlook really on storytelling, because I was so young. And I just became really interested in British comics at that point. I didn't get to read many of them until I was older. He's the only character whose entire run that I own. I own every issue of the 300 issue run. I got the trade paperbacks. I've bought the trade paperbacks when they're re-released just to have the different covers. It's kind of like, people that collect Batman or Superman or the Joker or whatever, Spider-Man it is. He just became that character for me. And so any chance I get to get on and to talk with some folks that have read his stories, I'm in.
May I just follow up? How are you guys familiar with the Constantine series that was on NBC or the Keanu Reeves movie?
Yes.
Unfortunately, in the face of the movie.
What'd you guys think of the TV series?
Both the movie and the series. It's really probably the first time that I cared about a character enough to where I really, really, really hoped they got it right. I like Matt Ryan, but everything is just always set in America, and that pulls him so far out of, London and the things that happen there and the people that he encountered. It's kind of like taking Batman out of Gotham.
Okay, I get that.
I really enjoyed the NBC series. I was very saddened to see it end after one season. If you are a fan of Matt Ryan's portrayal, however, the animated movie City of Demons is classic.
Yeah,
it is perfect Constantine.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah. So if I tell you guys that I watched the Constantine movie and had no idea it was based on a comic character. I was like,
and since we're talking about it, I mean, it was based on Dangerous Habits.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, I'm going through this book, and I'm like, wait a second, this seems awful familiar. He's slitting his. Wait a second, I've seen this before. I remember watching the movie, and I really liked the movie. Which, Mark, have you watched it yet?
Not yet, but like I said, this Thursday we'll be doing an on trial for it, and this book would influence the movie.
Yeah, I liked it. I thought it was something that I wasn't used to seeing, and I thought it had a lot of neat concepts. So
it has an amazing cast.
Yeah. Yeah. Who do we have?
Peter Stormare, Tilda Swinton. I mean, Gavin Rosdale. I mean, it was a very. I mean, I am not even attempting to butcher his name. The actor that played Papa Midnight, of course, has been in a lot of the Marvel stuff. I never can pronounce his name correctly. As a movie, I like the movie. As just as like a standalone movie, if just not even thinking about if I'm gonna let myself be like a purist and the comic book geek dickhead guy, then yeah, it wasn't the best.
Yeah, no, it is I do own it. It is a guilty pleasure of mine. It's a weird, very strange alternate version of Constantine.
It's an Elseworlds.
Yeah, it's definitely very different, and I wouldn't mind if they recast Chaz.
Oh, definitely.
But I mean, it's amusing and fun, and it's just. Plus, at the time, I figured it was the closest I was ever going to get to seeing John Constantine on a screen anyway. So,
right.
I mean, the TV show. Yeah, like was said, takes him out of England and everything. But at least Matt Ryan does a pretty good Constantine. So at least, even if everything else around him is different.
He voiced him in the animated too, didn't he?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's been voicing him since that for anything animated. So I'm sure that animated thing was him too. But at least he's pretty good at John.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That always helps.
Yeah, I think I'm about 3 episodes in. Me and Mark will be doing the TV party when this week, whenever this airs. So I've enjoyed myself.
Because the original character that the series ended on the Vertigo comic issue 300 is coming back October 30th this month in the Sandman universe.
Oh, really?
He's making his comeback. I actually, strangely enough, and this is totally me geeking out, Marcio Takara, the artist on the one shot that comes out on the 30th, I actually got to talk to her on Instagram today, and I've been pumped because she's fantastic. But in the Sandman universe world, where they've been, slowly, I think this is kind of like season 2 that's coming out this fall. He has the one shot at the end of the month, and then a new ongoing will start. Sandman Universe presents, Hellblazer.
Ooh.
So he's coming back this month. So it's pretty awesome. That's another reason why when you were like, you want to talk? I was like, hell yeah.
Put me on. We're going to be talking about these first 3 issues, which is Hellblazer number 41, titled The Beginning of the End, Hellblazer 42, A Drop of the Hard Stuff, and Hellblazer number 43, Friends in High Places. According to the wiki, John Constantine is a warlock, a detective, and a con man. What makes this time in John's life so significant? His body has just handed him a death sentence. Terminal lung cancer. After all the threats that John has faced in the past, it is his own vices, specifically 30 cigarettes a day, that did him in. Attempting to come to grips with his diagnosis, John visits a cancer ward to see what lies in his future. It is here he meets another sufferer by the name of Matt, and the 2 cynical souls become friends. John then decides to pay a visit to his friend Brendan in Ireland with the hopes that he knows of some magic that may come through with a cure, but it is all for naught. However, the 2 spend some time catching up, and Brendan lets him know he found a place under his property that has a pool of water that was blessed, and he has learned the secret of turning water into wine. The friends drink the night away, and while Brendan is passed out, John decides to leave. On the way out the door, John bumps into the first of the fallen, Satan, who has come to collect Brendan's soul just after midnight. As John follows Satan to Brendan, John realizes it is just before the stroke of midnight and convinces the devil to have a drink with him, tricking him into drinking the lager disguised holy water and knocking him into the pool. Brendan dies, but his soul goes to heaven, as Satan is not able to collect. However, John knows that when it is his time, he is going to suffer for what he has just done, and Satan will be coming to collect on the contract that fell through. The next day, he is found by a demon friend by the name of Ellie, and he asks her what he can do to avoid his fate. After assuring John that he is going to suffer unimaginable torture, she suggests he go and speak to the angel Gabriel. The Snob, I think, is what he's known as in the book.
Yeah.
Finding Gabriel, John attempts to persuade him, but Gabriel is certain that John should pay for all the misery and sins committed in his life, and is decidedly against helping him. John leaves and retires to a bar where he believes, at closing time, he believes he's come up with a last resort way to save his own life. So there's the first 3 issues. Mark Radulich, what's your thoughts here, man? I mean, you grabbed this book, you have no idea what you're getting into. I sent you a message before, I sent you a message Saturday, and I said to you, you need to be ready for when you're going to read this. Mark, I'm going to go ahead and let you, this is your story to tell.
2017, I was diagnosed with diverse B-cell lymphoma. It was pretty far along. I think it was stage 4 by the time they figured out what was wrong with me. I went through 2 different kinds of chemo over the course of that spring and summer. And then by August, I was in full remission. And then this past April-ish, May, they said the cancer was back. And so past summer, I did a brand new kind of treatment, which was called CAR-T, which required a week stay in the hospital, a month living close to the hospital, and then another month at home before I could return to work. So, 2 bouts of cancer. I'm not totally cured from it, by the way. There's still I have 1 lesion that has shrunk and seems to be reacting positively to the treatment, and another mystery fucking lesion they don't know what to do with. So more on that in November when I go back for more tests. So I mean, that's the obvious connection for me. The funny thing was, when I got diagnosed, they were like, "This is stage 4 lymphoma, but lymphoma is kind of a pussy cancer, and it's so curable." it's so curable. Like the doctors are just, I mean, the pulmonologists, the doctors, they're so just like, yeah, we're gonna wipe this out, no problem. It's fought a little harder than they thought. It's not quite the pushover they thought it was, but at the time they were like, oh, if you can fucking deal with this cancer standing on your head, I'm like, hot dog. They did say that had it been stage 4 lung cancer, they'd have been talking, and doctors are great, they'd have been talking about how we can make you comfortable. I'm like, oh, good. I definitely avoided dying.
Yeah.
By getting the right cancer, if there's such a thing. So
Jesus Christ. If you're gonna get a cancer.
That's kind of what they said, actually. Almost those exact words. Like, if you're gonna get cancer, this is the best one to get, pal. You win. Like, cool. How about I just not get cancer?
Oh, you want a toe? I can get you a toe.
Here's what I'll say. In the lead up to the initial, this time around, I was getting so many tests, and they were watching me so closely that the cancer never really, like, they knew it was there, but it had no real effect on my body at the time that they decided to do something about it. It was so far before it got dangerous. The first time, though, it had gone on for so long, and I had been sick for so long that I was having all kinds of medical problems. It was the worst I ever felt in my life, especially for somebody who rarely got sick until he hit 40 and his whole body fell apart. So reading this and seeing John Constantine wake up and, he's like vomiting in the sink and blood's coming out. And that first issue where he's waking up and he realizes that, that he knows something is wrong. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty dead on. I am personally related to that. The doctor saying to him, like, you're dead, basically. I mean, that's not inaccurate. I was like, yeah, this kind of sounds like what happened to me. I definitely at one point ran across one doctor who was like, do X, Y, Z, or you'll be here in 6 months, and even then you'll probably die shortly after. Jeez. Cool. And it was so funny because I think my reaction to reading some of this was, I was thinking about like Andy Kaufman in the movie Man on the Moon. I don't know how true this is, but in the movie it's portrayed as he's trying so many things to heal his terminal cancer. Like at one point he's doing like a lot of like new agey Asian medicine kind of things. Like he's doing something with like chakras and rocks and stuff like that at one point. And you get kind of desperate after a while. Like you'll try anything. Like, here, take this, put this on your head, stand on your hands, slam a VCR into your head, and you won't get cancer. Oh, sure, cool. I'll try anything. And you go through that. You're willing to do just about anything to not have cancer anymore. As a motivating factor for driving the plot forward, I can totally see where Constantine's kind of like first just going to the cancer center and seeing like, well, what am I in for? What does this look like? Again, I became like a Google doctor. I was looking at everything, trying to read up as much as I can. I drove myself a little crazy looking up all this stuff, and I loved his conversations with Matt. I thought that was really fun, and I enjoyed kind of Matt's take on imminent death. Was an interesting read for me.
Cole Maritet.
As I said before, this is probably my favorite arc of the whole run that I've read. And these first 3 are a really great setup for the big payoff, which we'll get into later. But I really liked the fact that this con man, this guy who's always one step ahead of, everyone else, who's planning out 3-4 moves in advance so he can beat whatever force he's come up against. He's finally hit a brick wall, and this is something that he can't outwit. This is something that is physically wrong with him, and none of his tricks are working. So he just sort of backslides into, like you said, he ends up in a bar and just drinking his head off because nothing's working. He's tried every trick in the book and nothing's working. And that sort of desperation is really compelling reading.
Tim?
I really, really enjoyed it. This was Garth Ennis's first published work in American comics. So if you're Garth Ennis fan, like, this is the first big nosedive, first big gig he had. And coming from the very British, the very London Jamie Delano stuff into the Ennis stuff, it's very Ennis, and it, you see a lot of themes and a lot of attitudes. Like, I had a real conservative Christian upbringing, so me coming into this comic and really just the whole idea of the occult in my head, everything was very organized. And all of a sudden I start reading this comic, and Ennis has them turning holy water into a stout. The first of the fall. Then we find out there's more of the fall, and I'm like my mind was so interested in the mythology straight away that he was trying to build. And he said, I've read a couple interviews, and he said, I tried to do the one thing that no one had done, Constantine, and that was kill him. So straight away, his first American gig, he gets this comic, and the first thing he does is ballsy. He just okay, I'm just going to kill this guy. And really, it does produce some drama that, you just really, up until this point, and really in comics in general at this point, that you just hadn't seen. You're going to give your main character cancer. And I thought it was bold, especially for my little brain. It was just really, really, really good stuff. And I really enjoyed it.
I love how you talk about, the conservative upbringing, and then you're reading this comic, and we got Satan coming in here, and stuff like that was, it was taboo, kind of like you didn't, if you got your hands on a comic like this, you didn't want your mom and dad finding out that you were reading it. Were you
exactly?
I was going to say, were you hiding this from your parents at all?
It's one of those things that did make me nervous. Obviously, we all watched movies, growing up, and we've all snuck and peeked, with my parents and stuff like that. I'd stand in the perfect place in the house to try to see the TV, to see what was going on when they were watching movies I wasn't allowed to watch and stuff like this. My mom, she had no idea that comic books were like this. So I was like, I would get killed if I was reading this, but I was in that safe place of, she's not going to read it. She's not going to pick it up and check. So I was, definitely getting away with something. So it's falling right in with the attitude of Constantine himself, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, Al Sedano, tell me about it, man. What's your thoughts on these first three?
Oh, I really love these first three. Especially, I have to say, 2 might be my favorite issue in the story. The whole story with Brendan having to just hang out with his friend, having a couple drinks, and then, spiking Satan's drink.
Yeah.
Maybe that part isn't as relatable, but I do love how he does in that story, how he tricks him to drink the beer.
Yep.
And then says, oh yeah, so the candles keep him stout from changing? Yeah, it keeps him from changing back to holy water. What? And just kicks it away and then beats him with the bottle. And then, like typical John Constantine, the next day after he does the stupid thing, goes, oh God, what the hell did I do? Which happens again in this story later. Towards the end, he's like, oh God, the next day he's like, what the hell did I do? Which is typical John. The first issue, I think, it's something Mark mentioned before, one of the creepiest things for me, I think I've read in a comic, the part where he's spitting up in the sink. He's like, that's not blood or mucus. That's a piece of myself that came out. Because then you start, at least that's how my brain works, you start thinking, it's like, I've had big loogies or things stuck in my throat. It's like, what if it's like something bigger and thicker? Like, what? Oh my God, what is that going to be like coming out of your throat?
Mm-hmm.
And like spitting that out, like, my God, that's horrifying.
Yeah. I was thinking it's probably part of his lung or something that he just that would be horrifying just to experience. Number one, you're watching him experience, but he's dealing with a real life thing. This is something that touches everybody. Mark Radulich, give us a crazy example of something comics does that we've read about that is just off the wall goofy.
Baby Darkseid.
I was going there. We can watch Baby Darkseid happen. We can watch Iron Fist turn into a building, okay? But here in this...
yes, here come the source material hits.
But, watching somebody go through this experience, go through this disease, watching somebody try to handle it, that's kind of a lot of what I got out of it. And I'm on the hook. I'm like, well, how in the hell is Constantine going to get out of this? Because that's the whole point of the book. It's like, okay, he's got to get out of this somehow, right? I was thinking, okay, well, maybe he does die. Maybe he goes to hell and we follow him through hell and he gets out of hell somehow. That's kind of what I thought was going to happen. So at the end of these first three, where he's just sitting there at the bar and he's like, I've got an idea. Well, who the hell is not going to buy the next issue? I mean, there's no way you pass up on figuring out how John Constantine is going to defeat cancer if he can, or stay alive if he can.
I just love the idea of, like, you go to your local... What year does this come out? So it's 1991, and, if you're around my age, you're in high school. You're like a freshman or, 10th grade in high school, and you go to your local comic shop. right over there in Wantagh, Long Island, and you're like, let me pick up a Superman, and I'll pick up a Batman, and I'm gonna get this Avengers comic, and oh look, here's this comic where this guy's dealing with cancer. Hey, wait a minute. It's just like when you think about what comic and you unspoken decade man, you think about like what comics were like in the 90s. This is such a different tenor.
Oh yeah.
From what else was happening there. Almost to the point of like, who the fuck was this for? Like, what kid? It's just like, let me get that Superman who fighting Lex Luthor and Bizarro and all that. Let me get this X-Men comic. And do you have something where I can deal with my own mortality? Is that a thing?
Well, yeah, this was the stuff of DC that was leading to Vertigo.
Yeah.
Sandman was out at this point, and Shade and Animal Man. Doom Patrol.
A lot of Vertigo. What you'll see is there's usually a little tagline that says for mature audiences or mature readers. I think that's normally what you would see. I think it might have even been on this one for sure, because there was definitely some curse words dropped throughout this book. Not to mention, if you were English, you'd probably be offended by some of the stuff that I found funny. But, there's... So I mean, Mark, we are used to, as a kid in the 90s, we're used to the funny books and some, I don't know, in the 90s, we were kind of leaning towards getting ready to get into the Image era and the Extreme and all that. But there was some comics out there that dealt with stuff like this a bit more than what I probably actually realized. It kind of dealt with real world situations or, just with stuff we weren't used to seeing. It didn't deal with the big two. It didn't deal with the Trinity, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, less superhero, more real, I guess.
Yes, it's Alan Tudyk said in Doom Patrol. This doesn't have the punchy parts.
No, no, it does not. It does not.
I'm an ICU nurse, so I've had the good fortune of taking care of people doing this job, but I have dealt with people with cancer, and I don't want to get too personal with you, Mark, but when listening to your story and what you were talking about, this book, the artwork is very different. It's not something that none of us were especially used to at this point, probably in our lives reading comics. There is a very specific, I think it's the entry into issue 3 of Friends in High Places, where it starts off with a close up to his face, and then it shows him and he's having a nightmare about cancer. There's that specific image. Do you like when they were talking about like him spitting up pieces of himself? Like when you read things or you encounter things in the media or books or movies or whatever, in reading this story, in a way, it's like the enemy of him is himself. His own body is attacking him. That one image of him, and it's just like his body is just turning and just into different things and all like that. To me, as a reader reading it, it seemed like a very graphical depiction of emotion, and I just thought that was pretty heavy for a comic. But it seemed like it might hit home.
No, it did. As you were talking, and I wasn't sure if you were going to ask me directly, but I'm on certain things. I'm an open book, and I'll tell you. Right before I started the first round of chemo back in 2017, one of the side effects of having cancer is, I'm going to probably mispronounce this word, but you become like diphoretic.
Yes. Yeah, you got it.
Okay, thank you. You sweat incessantly. Like, this isn't like you were moving boxes around your house or you went for a run or something, you got sweaty. Like, you're just sitting there and you're doing nothing, and you just have this uncontrollable sweat. I was like not retaining water basically, and I was pulling muscles left and right. Wow. I would just sitting still, and I would turn slightly, or not to be gross or anything, but I would like go to the bathroom and I would twist, to clean myself, and I would just pull all kinds of muscles. And I remember I live in Florida, and I was supposed to go on a cruise around this time, and we obviously couldn't go. I was a mess. So
that doesn't sound like something you want to take to sea.
If you've ever been on a cruise, you're always risking getting like Norwalk virus or something. Probably not the best time for me to go when I'm immune compromised.
Exactly.
So my friend, so we were supposed to go with my best friend's family, all of us together, and they ended up going, and then we met them at Disney World when they came back. We went to like downtown Disney or whatever. It's hot. It's Florida. It's, it's springtime, which, springtime in Florida is still like summer everywhere else. So I'm sweating, and I'm not necessarily diaphoretic at this point, but I'm still sweating a lot, and I still have constant muscle cramp. Like I have to sometimes sleep with like ice packs on my knees because I'm in so much pain during all of this. But because I'm a dumbass, I will push myself anyway to do things I probably shouldn't be doing physically. So we met them in Disney, and we're walking around, and I'm sweating, and I'm hurt, and my muscles ache. And now at this point, we're in an air-conditioned store, and we're buying some souvenirs and stuff, and we're all just hanging out. And suddenly, my entire torso starts to like contort, basically. Like wow. Just doing nothing. I'm just sitting there like, online, and because I've sweat so much, and my body has practically no water in it, all my muscles just started like exploding, and you see me like twisting and trying to get myself comfortable, and I can't. And at this point, I'm like, I have to go find Gatorade, and like the fucking Hunchback of Notre Dame, I'm running out of the fucking store. Sanctuary, Gatorade, and I'm trying desperately to find anything with electrolytes in it, like that scene from Men in Black where the guy that turned into the cockroach alien and he's just eating sugar. Yeah, that was me basically. I need sugar. Because, like I said, my body just had no nutrients at this point, and I was in such bad shape. So yes, so when I think about like John like barfing up part of his ear or part of his lungs or whatever, that's kind of what I think about, like those points where you just don't know what to do. Your body just betrays you. I'm not going to tell any more, but I have like a bunch of stories like that where I just went to pieces all at once and publicly because I'm too much of a dumbass to stay home.
Fun.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I could bring that up.
I'll tell you.
I expected to come on here and talk this, and it just, it takes, and that's any story that you read. It's always interesting talking to people in this format because, so much stories, you bring so much to it personally that it just seemed so relevant. So I just had to ask. I appreciate you.
Sure. Cole, I didn't want to leave you out. Was there anything left unsaid on your end?
Well, something that occurred to me when everyone else was talking, I just completely forgot about the whole interaction with the snob and how much I love the look into how angels function in the Hellblazer cosmology. John is like, I've done so much for you. Why can't you help me? And the Gabriel is just like, I don't believe in debts. And that's just his answer. He's just like, I don't care. My people don't believe in debts. Have a good life.
Isn't that a very contemporary theme? It's just like, but I've done so much. I've tried to help so many people. Yeah, but what have you done for me lately?
The whole character of Gabriel was one of the only things that not to get off on too much of a tangent, one of the only things that I felt translated well into the movie was that character and that interaction. It was very on point with the whole cosmology and the whole interpersonal relationship between John and Gabriel.
A comparison to that, or like the alternate, is his conversation with Ellie before, the demon, and how different their conversation is completely and how their relationship is. Gabriel's much more like almost Satan.
Exactly.
I guess because Satan was an archangel. So it's like the same thing. They're both very high up and very proper, and they both very believe in where they are at, and you're all below them. And Ellie's like just one of the working class people. Like, yeah, here you go. Which sandwich do you want?
The snob was evoking images for me of the Merovingian from the second Matrix movie.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I'm disappointed Ellie was not in the movie or even the TV show, as far as I remember, because I liked her as a character.
I was going to say, is this her first appearance in this series, or I should say, in this story? For some reason, I'm thinking they said that this was her first appearance, or did she have any appearances prior to this?
She was prior. A lot of what you see in this was really Ennis did a great job at kind of taking all these kind of bits and stories that had come before and kind of kind of bringing them to kind of like a resolve in a way, and then kind of going off in his own direction. His interaction with Chaz in this story is one of my favorites. I can't remember which issue it was when he gives him the letter or whatever.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Yeah, and you don't see Chaz a lot in this story because it deals so much with John and him internalizing and trying to figure this thing out. At least you do get in this story. At least you see that side of John, that is how much he cares about Chaz and how much he does care about his friends, even though that being John Constantine's friend is pretty much a shit draw.
Yeah. All right. Well, if there's nothing else left unsaid, we'll go ahead and get into the next 3 issues here in a synopsis. So this is Hellblazer number 44, titled My Way, Hellblazer number 45, called The Sting, and Hellblazer number 46, Falling into Hell, which is the epilogue to this story. John is reaching out to those he knows, his sister Cheryl, a previous friend by the name of Chaz, and his newfound comrade Matt, and saying some very heartfelt goodbyes, as what he believes is going to happen next may very well be final. He then finds an empty apartment and summons what appears to be a demon and makes a deal. For what? We are not told. After the demon leaves, he waits some time and completes another ritual, summoning a second demon, making another undisclosed deal. As more time passes, after that demon leaves, John takes one last swig of Brendan's whiskey, grabs a razor blade, and slits his own wrists. As he loses blood, Satan appears, intent to watch him die and collect his soul. As blood pours from his wrist, another demon appears, and then another. So we'll just go with the first of the fallen, the second of the fallen, and the third of the fallen are there to collect John's soul, as he apparently has promised it to each of them. Since all 3 fallen angels lay claim to John's soul, they now have a choice. Go to war with each other, and to the victor go the spoils, or save John's life so that he does not die. John gambles that the demons will not war with themselves, because if they do, it will leave them with less to put forward in their war with heaven. The 3 relent, and Satan heals Constantine of his mortal wounds and of his cancer. John Constantine has won. In the epilogue, after running into an old friend by the name of Kit, John realizes he needs to find his friends he said goodbye to and pretty much let him know that he's going to be okay. He catches up with Chas and heads to the hospital to see Matt. Fearing he was too late and that Matt had passed away, he walks into the room to see Matt alive. As the two talk, Matt explains to John that he needs to hold on to the friends that he has, as they are what remind a person of who they are. As Matt is talking, he begins to cough up blood, and among the scattered medical personnel, John watches his friend die horribly. John's guilt of conning his way into surviving cancer and then watching a respected friend die of it is too much to bear, as he makes his way outside and falls to his knees. But there at his side is Kit, providing comfort and a shoulder to grieve on. So there you go. That's our last 3 issues of Dangerous Habits. Cole Maritet, we're going to start with you, buddy. What do you think here, man?
This is probably my favorite arc of Constantine, and it's all summed up. His entire character is summed up in 2 pages. At the end of a page, he's walking away from the 3 demons, the 3 lords of hell, and he says, "Oh, by the way, fellas." And then you go to the next page, and it's a full-page splash of him throwing him the bird and saying, "Up yours."
Yes.
And that is, if that is not John Constantine in a nutshell, I don't know what is.
Yeah, buddy.
I
was going to say I watched a YouTube video, of a guy who did a review on this, just see if, usually when I do my own stuff, I'll read it, I'll make my notes, and then I usually want to make sure I don't miss anything. So I'm watching a dude's video. Now, the thing is that it's a YouTube video, but it's just a static image. And the only image is John Constantine giving you the finger. So anybody that's read this, that is the panel. That is the page.
Oh,
that
God.
is the one.
That is the money
one.
shot.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He is a con man, and that's the core of his character. And so, of course, his solution, it's not Superman whose solution is, I'm going to fly around the world and turn it backwards and turn back time. It's not Batman who invents a new gadget and uses it against Mr. Freeze. His solution to the problem that he runs into is, I'm going to run a con. That's the essence of the character. That Garth Ennis knocked it out of the park in his first outing. And if I'm being honest, I don't think he ever reached that same height.
Wow. It's kind of scary when a new creator takes over a book. So I don't know what's come before this. You guys probably do. When we did Swamp Thing, we watched Alan Moore take over, and did he throw a curveball at you.
Yeah.
You say that this was faithful to what John Constantine was supposed to have been. I mean, was there any other? Do you recall anything being different from the character that came before? Anything that stood out to you, like, oh goodness, this is something that I could tell was, heavy-handed with Garth Ennis he put in there. Was there anything that you could tell prior to that, or when you read it?
I mean, the scene where he's in the rain crying about his friend dying, it's character growth, but at the same time, it's not as much a part of Constantine's character as the rest of the series is. It felt a little hammy, like he was playing it up a little bit. Normally, he's the kind of guy who, well, that happened. I'm sorry. Now I'm moving on.
Okay.
Instead of being like, oh, the crushing weight of what I've done is going to kill me. And
I didn't interpret it that way.
Okay, yeah. That's fair.
Because I get what you're saying, that he's too cool for school in most circumstances. The way that I was reading it was, he came face to face with his own death, and not because he was put in a perilous situation, but because his body was near death. And he ran this gambit to get out of it. And I think that part he's able to compartmentalize mentally and go, okay, well, this is the thing that I do. I fuck people and I get away with it. And sometimes people get hurt for it. But hey, it's the price of doing business when you're doing magic. But I think, but by the same token, he had developed this friendship with this guy, and there is such a thing as survivor's guilt. And so I think while he, like I said, is able to compartmentalize this part of himself where he's able to trick the devil into curing him, he's not able to rationalize or compartmentalize watching his own friend, devoid of all the other things going on in his life, magic and the occult and all of that. He watched a human, ordinary, run-of-the-mill friend die in one of the most graphic ways possible, in the sense of he wasn't like killed or anything. His body just gave out, and he vacated the whole 9 yards. And I think watching that and I think it made him come face to face with the fact that there's a part of him that's really shitty. It's just a shitty human being. And I think he rationalizes it with the amount of people that he saves and demons that he puts down and all of that. Tricking people is tricking people, even when you do it to a demon. And I think there's a certain amount of, I'm kind of a shit for doing it, even though I survived and they're bad people anyway. No, there's nothing like watching a friend die that make you come face to face with your own faults, your own lack of character. So I was okay with it. But to me, that was what I got out of him kneeling in the rain, just sort of trying to reconcile. That's what I was looking for. Reconcile these different parts of himself in the face of death.
When it comes to the character, the one thing that John has always done is he always, as much as he needs those people, he will also use those people in a heartbeat. And I think that what he realized is when he went off and he got his cancer cured, like you were talking about with survivor's guilt, when he come back to see Matt, they were no longer alike. The bonding point that they had, that they bonded over, all of a sudden, John comes back and he remembers, oh shit, I forgot about this guy, which is really kind of characteristic of him. And when he gets back, he's like, oh, well, I went off thinking about myself and I cured myself of cancer, but here I am, I survived yet again and one of my friends died. Like that's kind of like a mainstay of what happens with him is he gets out. He cons his way out, but he's usually the only one that gets out.
And that's true, but there's also one other thing that I've thought about this time reading the story, is that especially this time period, John was definitely created his thing was, he was in there in Thatcher's England, he was definitely against that regime, that's, that political system. He even says it when he says, his goodbye to London, all you people screwing everyone else for your own benefit.
Right.
And he does these cons and everything, and usually is the one to get out, but these are like these cons like against demons, and maybe somebody gets a bit shafted in the way, but overall it's a better thing. Right. But like he says, and like I said earlier, when he goes, oh crap, what did I do? He realizes, I almost sent them all to war together, destroying hell and basically giving heaven, the other side, the advantage, and now dooming everyone. Like, I could have screwed the whole world. He basically did everything that he was fighting against. He said, this is what I want, and I'm going to potentially screw everybody.
Right.
over to get what benefits me, as opposed to just screwing over like a couple of bookies to make some money, or some lower, or that truck driver in issue 2 where he, flattens his tires.
I think it's a very
I was
heavy.
kind of a dick to him.
I think it's a very heavy thing when you realize just how shitty of a human being you are.
Yeah, and
Like,
so
oh,
definitely.
I think the Matt dying there, maybe at another time he might have been able to handle it easier, but after all of that,
yes,
I think John was like at a breaking point for himself.
He went through all of this just to try and save his own life. And I think at one point he was, committed to the fact, well, I'm going to die. And then he's like, well, maybe there's a chance I can get out of it. And with Matt, what he saw in Matt was himself. He saw that's where he was going to be. He knew that that's where he would end up, or where he should end up. And then, he becomes friends with this guy. And of course, if you're a friend with somebody, 9 times out of 10, John Constantine, I don't know what the odds are for him, but a lot of times you're going to want the best for that person. Man, in the epilogue where he was like, oh, I've got to go see Matt. I've got to go see Matt. I've got to talk to Matt. I was on pins and needles. Matt's going to be dead. He's going to walk into that hospital room. Matt's dead. He's going to have lost his chance to have said goodbye, or at least tell him that he's going to be okay. Because the last time he left him, he didn't know what was going to happen. So to see him there and see him alive, all of a sudden you watch John Constantine go through these highs and lows. In the bar, oh, I've got a plan, he's up high again, and then he's back low again. He tricks the devils, oh, he's back up high again. And then he goes and he sees his buddy Matt, and he's got all that hope, and he's riding that high, and then he watches him die. And I think, me personally, I could see why it would bring a man to his knees, for sure.
That last interaction, very evocative of A Christmas Carol, very Ghost of Christmas Future. He evaded death for the time being, but I think somewhere in the back of Constantine's mind, he knows death. He will eventually die. So, watching someone sort of expire the way that Matt does, I think Constantine sort of looks at that and goes, I've just punted the ball. I haven't solved anything. This is still my future.
The title of the story is Dangerous Habits. It's not bad habits. It's dangerous habits. Okay. There's a lot of danger in what John Constantine does. But, that's what gets me about this story, is that it's something very real and very down to earth that can potentially take John Constantine out. Now, the question is does he change? Cole Marentet, answer me that. Does he learn his lesson after this? Does he clean up his ways?
No.
There's no Hellblazer, the vegan series?
No.
Did you say the vegan?
Yes.
Well, what's the first thing he does when he gets cured? He puts his clothes back on, he lights up.
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty much it right there. John has often been referred to as an adrenaline junkie, only his high is magic. He will consistently, over the course of the series, continue getting himself into scrapes like this, usually through his own doing, sometimes out of a misplaced or misguided need to help someone, and end up hurting or killing people because of it. He beats the demon in the end, but at the same time, good people got hurt. Good people got killed. John does not change up his act very much over the course of what I've read.
It's a pretty tragic character. I mean, when you think about it, it's pretty tragic, going through all of this stuff, and then that's what makes him interesting, though. I think that's what makes him very interesting, is that he just can't escape himself. Tim Browning, I want to switch it over to you here real quick.
I just think that coming into this series, to an established series, and it being his, like, Ennis's first American work, like, it was, I just think it's just a real ballsy story. I mean, like, there's a lot of musical references throughout this run. Like, of course, you got the Pogue song, which is the last panel in the book. But you got one of the chapters is called My Way, which is obviously a Frank Sinatra big hit and stuff like that. The story in and of itself is just it grabs so much of who the character is, and like I said, just killing a character or pitting him against death as your first move. I just always thought that was real ballsy, and it just really set the tone for the work that Ennis did on this character. What's really interesting though is like I was talking about earlier, just all of us, if we throughout American storytelling and stories and all, like we're all tend to be familiar, even if you're not a churchgoer or you didn't have a strong religious background or anything like that. You're familiar a lot of times with like the mythology, we'll call it, of all these things. And Garth Ennis does not have. He's actually has a lot of beefs with religion. If you've ever read Preacher, then
a comic book writer has a beef with religion. Wow.
So
I'm so shocked.
Man, it just it was one of the things that really challenged me. I was like, that was a big deal to read. To a lot of Constantine is just really, it's not traditional at all. The storytelling, undercutting, the cons. All those things. If you want to get to know this character, I do think that it's a really great jumping on point, and then going back and kind of fleshing him out, because that was another thing. Alan Moore created this character, and then he never wrote any of the standalone series. That's pretty wild. And then you got Jamie Delano, and then you have Ennis, and then Neil Gaiman, Warren Ellis, Andy Diggle. There's tons of them. Brian Azzarello. There's so many great writers that Mike Carey really grabbed this character. So we're not the only ones that loved it. It definitely, this character had a big impact on a lot of people, and this story in particular really grabs you by the horns. So I think it's a great story.
So he was created by Alan Moore.
Yes, originally he was. Constantine was. The guys that Alan Moore created him with, as far as the look of the character, they wanted to make a character based on the likeness of Sting. They actually retroactively said they actually drew a guy that looked like Sting in the earlier, it may have been that first story that he wrote for Swamp Thing that you guys were talking about earlier. There's a guy that's off panel, and they retroactively said that was John Constantine. So the character has, even with his first appearances, he's shady. Because like me and Jesse were talking, the first time he was ever saw in print was in Crisis of Infinite Earths, just because they pushed the data. I'm pretty sure they pushed that up a week, and it came out before his first appearance in Swamp Thing. Then they retroactively said that this Sting lookalike in the background of one of the panels was John Constantine. So he's a kind of like that guy who's all over the place. There's a famous story by Alan Moore. He said that he walked into, I don't know if it was like a coffee shop or deli or something like that in England. While he was in there waiting, a guy in a trench coat with blonde hair walked in and winked at him. As the guy went back to the bathroom, he famously says, "I just got the hell out of there." So this guy who manifested literally that looked like Constantine, it spooked him to where he left the shop that he was in. So he's just always has that kind of, I don't know, he's just a cool damn character, and you root for him, and he's the anti-hero, but at the same time, he is a bastard. Now, I do have a question for you guys, having read the story, because as an adult, revisiting this story a bunch of different times, we've all been familiar with, God, however many stories that we've all read. How do you guys feel about the technicality that this entire story, the linchpin, is that Brendan made a deal with the devil that his soul had to be collected before midnight? If that was not the precise deal he made the devil, none of the story works.
That's true. Right on that one thing.
Of course, I didn't see that as a kid reading it, but totally, as an adult, I was like, wow. If Brendan had not made that deal, he literally would have not insulted Satan, so he would have no claim to his soul. So literally, once again, just John being, a C word, basically got himself out of this cancer mess by just being just a prick.
Mm-hmm. But isn't that fiction though? If Woody had gone to the police, this would have never have happened.
Well, yeah, that's all these stories. I mean, you're always going to have the story about, the tunnel that people go into that they never come out of. And if we're telling a story about that, it's going to be about the person who comes out of it.
Right.
Exactly.
Because otherwise, what's the point? Otherwise, then, the story would have been over in 3 or 4 issues and the series would have ended because he would have died.
What is it, Jesse, we talk about, like, if people would actually talk to each other, you would have no movie or no television show.
Just have a discussion. That's all you got to do. Yeah, I think it was Evan Bevins who said My Little Pony. I mean, it's it's My Little Pony, where they if they just would just talk, we wouldn't have a problem here.
That was the entire premise for Three's Company.
Have a discussion.
No one talked to each other, and Mr. Furley looked for Klimt.
That is funny.
Al Sedano, give us your anything left unsaid, and give us your final thoughts on the book.
Well, it's a stupid thing, but something I realized thinking about it now, especially affecting me back in the day a bit. Well, not affected, but I realized something reading this. I had a bit of, I don't know if it's prejudice, but it definitely changed at least one of my misconceptions when he's talking about Kit. And he describes her as raven black hair, deep green eyes, Miss Ireland. And as an 18, 19-year-old reading this, my thought of Irish people was, well, freckles and red hair.
Yep.
And I'm like, wait, what? What? That's how you describe Irish people? And I love the friendship between him and Chaz, even though they probably are pissed off each other half the time. I mean, in this story, in the second half here, when Chaz finds out he's alive, I love that interaction.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, he just yells at him saying, I thought you were going to snuff it and that's it and you're fine? Yeah, I'm fine. Oh, all right then. See you for beer next week? Sure. All right.
Chaz has to feel like shit too, because he like lays into Constantine when he gets in that cab or whatever. Of course, it's like a shitbox car. Lays into him, and Constantine is like, "Yeah, man. Okay, well, right here's fine. I'll go ahead and get out." And then Chaz looks over and finds that letter. It's real heartfelt and it's written real nice.
All the money.
Oh yeah, and all the money.
But yeah, no. Reading this, you definitely can see a lot of the themes, especially things he would use, like the themes of friendship and everything. He would use in Preacher.
Oh yeah. That's something Mark's never read, and I want him to read, because you talk about some of the best Garth Ennis me personally, that's what made me go, holy shit, Garth Ennis.
But yeah, so I mean, you can see the themes of that. So that's another thing realizing afterwards, because obviously at the time when I read this, I don't know if either Preacher wasn't out yet or I hadn't read Preacher yet. But I can definitely see a lot of the themes with the interactions. I mean, Chaz and John, especially in that interaction, aren't too far off from Cassidy and Jesse in there.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just not calling each other mother, but yeah, and the funny thing is, all the important things you really want to talk about are really, even though it's a really cool, trick he does to them, the whole thing with the demons is even like the most least important thing to talk about. The big action sequence, so to speak, is the part that's like the least important of talking about.
Yes, the big action sequence is 3 yentas having an argument.
Well, I mean, you get the cool visual. I mean, come on, the first of the film showing up as like a twisted Jesus, bleeding all over, and then the crown of thorns coming out of his head and like forming all around his body.
No disagreement, and yeah, I made a crack about it, but the visuals are excellent. Look, the visuals of the whole comic, it's very evocative. It's definitely very interesting. I think it gets the themes across really, really well. But that's it. It's just you have these really, really cool images having an argument. With each other. They're having a very raucous debate about what to do with this dilemma they've gotten themselves into, and it's dramatic because you do have the one, I believe it's Satan, who is like, no, he made a fool of me, he made a monkey out of me, and I'm not giving this up. And the other two are just like, are you dumb? Like, what's wrong with you?
Wait a minute, I just realized something from what we said before, and you said now made me realize. So these 3 people who live in a similar area had a problem together and didn't talk to each other about it. It's Three's Company.
Three's Company.
That's right.
That's where he got the idea from. He watched Three's Company and wrote Dangerous Habits.
Cole Marentat, anything left unsaid? Final thoughts on the book?
There were Constantine stories before this, and there were good Constantine stories before this. His appearance in Swamp Thing was great. His appearance in Sandman was very fun. And his own series up to this point was interesting. I mean, it had been going on for 41 issues. But I think if anything set the tone for how this character would evolve until the New 52, when they rebooted him into the regular DC universe, which we don't talk about. It was Dangerous Habits. Dangerous Habits really introduced how Constantine affected the world and how he dealt with his problems to the world at large.
As far as like you guys that like Preacher, obviously Ennis did that with Steve Dillon. And strangely enough, Ennis didn't really feel like this was his strong work on this particular title. He when he actually I love hearing you guys say it because I agree with you. But Ennis said that he didn't think that William Simpson was the right guy for the job on this. I always thought that I always loved the artwork myself, but he felt that he literally quit smoking pot when Steve Dillon came on to do the artwork, and he felt like that it was that point when he really he felt like he did his best work on the character, and then obviously that led to Preacher. So I disagree with him. I think this was one of the best things that he did, and I also liked William Simpson's artwork. So as far as this particular run on the book, I think that what you were saying just a second ago was true. It is very important in this character's mythology that this is definitely something that really set the tone. If you enjoy this story, having this in your mind leading into the rest of the series is really going to help you enjoy the rest of it.
Okay, Mark, tell him, Mark, what's your final thoughts? Anything left unsaid, and then we'll get into plugs.
I really enjoyed this story. It's one of the best ones we've read this year. As much as I enjoyed the punchy comics, I also like ones that are very straightforward, that are very rich in theme, which this was, obviously. I don't need it to be overwrought. I say this a lot. I don't need it to be like the Dark Side War or, some of these other ones that we've done, especially from like the Kirby era with Rick Jones and the Supreme Intelligence on a fucking motorcycle. Sometimes I just want to read a story about a guy going through a thing and dealing with stuff. And that's what this was. And I thought it was well told. I really like this character. I enjoyed the character in the comic. I've enjoyed him as a television character on Legends of Tomorrow. I'm kind of 50-50 on the show, and we'll talk about that tomorrow on TV Party. But that's not his fault because I think he's a fun character. He's a very, I enjoy the concept of here we have a tortured character who's going around doing a thing, trying to do right, but sometimes things don't always work out in a way where he can do the right thing, and so he does the wrong thing. But he's always at least trying to make amends at some point and trying to work through it. And I think ultimately he's a good dude. The fact that the show doesn't do the best job with him, in its sort of monster of the week setting, that's not the character's fault. Mm-hmm. So overall, I would be interested in reading more Constantine stuff. I don't know what other standalone stories would be worth reading. I know that there's just kind of looking around for stuff. I noticed that the Rebirth, there's a Hellblazer series, and I'd certainly be interested in reading some of the Justice League Dark stuff with him and Zatanna and Swamp Thing. I enjoy those characters. We've covered each one of them on here at some point or another. I also like whenever I've seen Deadman show up hither and thither. I've enjoyed that as well. So overall, I thought, this was one of those where I just decided randomly we're going to talk about this, and it worked out really well.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings our coverage of Hellblazer Dangerous Habits to a close. We're going to go ahead and go around the horn here. We're going to start with Tim. It's been so long since you've been on a podcast. Do you have anything to plug? Did you just come out to join me tonight and you're not doing anything else, or what do you have planned, sir?
Yeah, man, I just came out tonight to get my feet back in and to enjoy talking to you guys. Obviously, it's something that I really loved when I was doing it, and I've missed it. I was hoping that tonight would kind of light the fire for me to get something rolling again. I never did cancel or get rid of the Thin Blue Ghost podcast that I was getting up and running. So might take in a different direction, might rebrand it, rename it or whatever, but definitely want to get back in. So I'll keep you guys updated, but just wanted to say personal thanks for including me. Let me come on, Jaw, about my favorite character, and just really enjoyed listening to all you guys, your perspectives and your opinions. I value getting the opportunity to talk to people about the things I love, so I appreciate y'all.
All right, Al Sedano, tell me about what's going on over there at the Resurrections podcast. Adam Adam Warlock and Thanos podcast. What's up, man? Plug anything you want.
Well, that's the show, Resurrections and Adam Warlock and Thanos podcast. It's, well, about the Marvel characters Adam Warlock and Thanos. It's right there in the name. Basically, it's just their stories, which is, you boil down to, a guy going through things, dealing with stuff. If the things are outer space and the stuff is, religion's based on himself. But, otherwise, exactly just like the same type of stuff we talked about tonight. Yeah, really.
Yeah, really.
We just finished up Infinity Countdown, and we're also going back to and finishing up the 70s stories by Jim Starlin and getting to the end of that. Find that most podcatchers and resurrectionsadamwarlock.tumblr.com. I'm on Twitter at AdamThanosPod.
Cole Marentet, I know you be playing the video game, so you got to plug the Twitch. You got anything else you want to plug? Feel free to do so. So go ahead, sir.
I do play the video games. You can find me over on Twitch, twitch.tv/thefilmtwit, where I play a wide selection of mostly single-player games. Right now I'm playing through the Vampire Souls-like Code Vein. You can also find me on Twitter occasionally, at thefilmtwit, where I post notices of my going online and other various bits and bobs. But other than that, that's about all I've been doing lately. We're planning on doing another Code Vein stream probably in the next couple days. Definitely want to keep an eye on that Twitter account for updates on when that's going to happen.
All right, Mark Radulich, tell me about the schedule and what we got coming up on the Radulich in Broadcasting Network.
All right, last week it was Joker all day, every day. Ha, ha, ha. We did Joker by Brian Azzarello on source material. We did a Damn You Hollywood review of the movie Joker starring Joaquin Phoenix. We reviewed my favorite band of all time other than Clutch, Steel Panther, Heavy Metal Rules. And then Jesse and I reviewed Pennyworth for all the tosses and wankers out there.
Oh, yes. Sold off you.
Victor Kirkado from the All About Life podcast joined me to do a watch-along alternative commentary for Alexander Usyk versus the boxing debut of one kickboxing and MMA extraordinaire Tyrone Spong on DAZN. What's DAZN rhyme with, Jesse?
Alzone, baby.
That's right. Tomorrow.
We practice these bits offline.
Tomorrow, myself and Jesse will be doing a TV party for the NBC series Constantine. This Wednesday, we'll be reviewing the new Baby Metal Galaxy. And then Sean Comer and I, as mentioned before, Mr. Competitive Overwatch, will be doing an on-trial for the Keanu Reeves Constantine. Next week, we've got Fear Itself on the Source Material podcast. We'll be doing a Damn You Hollywood review of Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. We'll be reviewing one of Jesse's, the future ex-Mrs. Starcher from Lacuna Coil, Black Anima. Mm-hmm. Finally, Jesse and I will be doing a TV party tonight for the straight-to-video release Doom Annihilation.
That's right. All right, very good. Well, I cannot thank these boys enough for coming on here and having a podcast with me. Mark, first off, thank you for allowing the network to happen and shows like this to happen. I would never in my life believe that we could gather these 4-5 souls together to talk about one comic book, and that's what makes podcasts just a wonderful, wonderful
No
thing.
thanks are necessary. I'm a whore for content.
I like it. I like it. So for Mark Radulich, for Al Sedano, for Cole Marentet, and for Tim Browning, I am Jesse Starcher. We will catch you next week. Sod off, you wankers. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Radulich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts that we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word, and as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.
We're all here to have a good time, and I've got the mute button, so there you go.
Yeah, just hang up on me. It's fine.
Now what happened to Mark? Oh, he made an inappropriate joke. All right, there you
You
go.
got Mark on a 5-second delay.
Get on with it, you wanker.
He was based on Bowie. Sting. Never mind. I get them confused sometimes.
Okay.
That's how I pronounce Sting. Bowie.
Perfect.
Like Mr. Pink. I don't believe in tipping.
You know what? You convinced me.
I got Madonna's big dick in one ear.
Oh, here we go.
But no,
Toby Chang? Toby Chang.
Go ahead, Cole, before we get the rest of the movie.
You can't trust demons or Vince McMahon.
I was gonna say it actually fits really well because Lucifer shows up, and then there's the Vince McMahon story, and they kind of mesh.
The not trusting demons is surprising. The not trusting Vince McMahon, yeah, I knew that. Everyone knows that. That's simple.
Picturing now Alan Moore at the DC offices, you know, Jesse. Now he's back at the offices. It's like, they're like, hey, listen, Alan, you know, we really like that one Constantine character that you created. We're gonna go ahead and give him his own series. Fucking Constantine, he's a fucking big player. I just needed him for the fucking panel. He's not a fucking character. He's like, fucking, what, you gonna put fucking Firestorm in there? We might, Alan, we might.
At some point, this red-haired girl shows up in the, I think, like, the insane asylum, and someone yells out ginger pubes. So I just want to point that out.
That's okay.
Classy on the Source Material podcast.
And one day, you want to keep it classy, I went to the bathroom, there sat the trade, I grabbed the trade, okay?
I mean, it's no Kingdom Come. You know what? Throw that one on the bingo card, Jesse. Also not Sam Keith.
Fuck off.
But like, it's
Fuck off, you wanker!
come and knock on our door. Satan's waiting for you.
Who's Jack Tripper? Which one's Chris? That's the question.
Yeah.
Jesse,
Right.
wasn't Garth Ennis responsible for Welcome Home, Frank?
Manucci got the ill communication. Oh, man, that was...
Look, bears! And I'm on Twitter at yeah.
Oh.
And while he's got semi-terrible taste in music at 5 years old, I'm proud of him for basically telling me to go fuck myself, and that he'll like what he likes, and and piss up a rope, Dad. It's like Monty Python minus the humor.
What's Monty Python? That joke's over.
There we go.